So this post I made on Twitter blew up quite a bit recently. Basically explores some of the political camps that have formed around the two recent, most recent world conflicts. And I was asked by the STOA to give a presentation on this. And I'll basically, before I dive into this chart more, I'll give some background on why I think these camps form, and why I think this thing resonated with so many people. So yeah, um, I think in general we are becoming more partisan than ever. Many people have probably seen this chart. It's basically on the voting records of the Democratic and the Republican Party. Basically, what it looked like 50, 60 years ago compared to what it looks like today. And as you can see, the bipartisan voting has significantly decreased, and people kind of vote much more with the people they have voted with before. And I think many people assumed, or at least hoped, when the internet came around, that opinions would become more diverse. You have um, such an abundance of information, different opinions that are everywhere. You can read up on everything. You have so much more information, and you think, people would be more free and have more free political opinions through this. But as we see, the exact opposite has happened. And one of the reasons for this is just that ideas on the internet propagate much faster. And we have this nonlinearity. Nassim Taleb talks a lot about this in his book Anti-Fragile, basically about, 1,000 pebbles do much less impact or harm than one big stone. And I think this is what we see with memes and opinions on the internet, especially on social media, that kind of like the impact of collective political opinion is very non-linear with the popularity. And yeah, I'll jump a bit back into this later, but let's first go into the post I made and kind of the classifications that were made there. So there are two main parts to this, which I think people found interesting, right? It's the political camps that have formed, and I think a lot of people recognize those political camps. And then also just the horseshoe theory, which we keep seeing again and again on many opinions. And just to explain the horseshoe theory for those of you that have not heard about this before, it's basically a theory that, the way we kind of look at the political spectrum is, right, we have like the far left, the left, center, right, and the far right. And the intuition would tell you that, if you go really far left, that would be like the most extreme opposite to the far right. But what we see is kind of the opposite, and it's basically that the far left and the far right, they end up at the same stances or the same opinions uh, quite often. And while they might have different motivations for those opinions, they kind of end up at the same place. And that's quite interesting to see. And you see this again and again with a lot of opinions, especially online. And yeah, to jump into the chart itself, which I posted, and I'll try to keep this like as politically impartial as possible. Of course, like very far left, very far right, that's a bit harder. But I'll try to explain my reasoning around this chart and kind of what those political camps are. Yeah, let's jump into the far left camp first. So these are the people that you mostly see support Russia and Palestine. they're quite a fringe group. There's not that many of them, but yeah, we most often call them tankies. They're mostly kind of old Soviet communist sympathizers. They often side with China and Russia on a lot of things, and it's basically it comes from this like communist history, but also this kind of strong contempt for the West and kind of the, the capitalism brought forward what the West is today, and that's kind of why they side with Russia here. They also are like strong supporters of this guerrilla warfare, so they often like support those kind of terrorist attacks. For example, the one that happened um, in Israel from the attack from the Gaza Strip. They think that this resistance is very justified, and also supported kind of other socialist uprisings in Latin America historically, and yeah, kind of think this guerrilla warfare is the only way for these groups to emerge, basically, and yeah, get away from their oppression. Um, Not that many of those, but they do exist, and you will see them around. Um, and yeah, then we've got the left. So this is kind of your classic American liberal left. These are often Ukraine and Palestine supporters. So I think a lot of the reasoning behind that is they're very much against oppression. Like they're supporting the underdog usually. So, like because Israel is stronger, it kind of automatically falls that you should support Palestine, which is kind of the weaker group in that conflict. And look, I think it's not completely black and white, and I think a lot of people within like certain camps here, right? They might understand both sides of the conflict, but this chart is trying to show like which side they think is the most right. And yeah, and next we've got the center. So these are kind of your American centrist. I think while on the previous one we kind of have some parts of the Democratic Party. I think we have other sides of the Democratic Party that goes in here, and then other sides of the Democratic Party that goes in here. They are Ukraine/Israel supporters, right? Like they, in general, think just democracy, Western civilization is what should triumph. Again, right? Like I think there's a lot of nuanced opinions also. I think especially on the Israel-Palestine crisis, but right, like they still think that Israel is primarily in the right, at least in this recent conflict. And then you've got the kind of right. I think this a lot of the new MAGA right camp. They are they have some sympathy for strength, I think, and like who Putin is, uh, and like having that basically. They're also like anti-interventionists, so they kind of believe, especially on the Russia-Ukraine side, right, that we should not help Ukraine because that's like their conflict, and but like they're still Israel supporters because they're still kind of have the sympathy for strength, and also that like they are the stronger ones. They are like the more kind of civilized in, I guess, like that conflict, but I think it comes mostly from this. Okay, like they're the stronger ones, and also like this anti-interventionism. And then we have the far right, which I think we see like supporting Russia-Palestine. I think a few names you can mention there, like Nick Fuentes, Jackson Hinkle. Yeah, it's usually rooted in kind of fascism/Nazism. They have like this deep contempt for the West, actually, because of because of wokeism and, you know, like all those kind of movements, they think the West has fallen. So they're like very strongly in this Russia camp. You know, they often also support China on that side. And, you know, in general, they're kind of, as many fascists and the Nazis, they're also just anti-Semites. So if you look at the Israel-Palestine conflict, just by process of elimination, they don't like Palestine that much, but they just like Jewish people much less. And that's kind of how they end up with this reasoning. And right, and like we see here, right, like there's two different ways how they got to like the Russia-Palestine camp, but they still got there, and it was still that opinion. And I think we see that quite often uh, across the political spectrum, which I think is quite interesting. Yeah, and I would argue that most American politics can be lumped into these five sections. And I think like if your opinion stays within one section here, it will kind of continue to proliferate like across a lot of different topics. Right. So again, you have kind of like the tankies far left tribe here, then like the liberal left. Some members of the Democratic Party go in here. I think then you have like the centrist. I think you have like kind of the a bunch of the Democratic Party here. You have like a bunch of the Republican Party here. Yeah, it's kind of like center opinion. Then you have yeah, a lot of the new right here. Like these are, I would say, like a lot of like the um, MAGA crowd. And then I think yeah, you have like the far right here. These are like your Nick Fuentes, like Jackson Hinkle, those type of people that go in on the far right. And yeah, I think like a lot of the opinions like don't deviate that much from these section. And sometimes I find it quite frustrating because you'll hear someone from like this section and they'll have like very strong views on one thing, but then, you know, like as soon as something else comes up that is within this tribe and this tribe has decided that that is what their opinion will be about this thing, then like they are still not deviating from that part. And um admire people a lot who like I think are in a certain tribe, but then suddenly I see like an opinion here, or you know, they're in this tribe, I'll see like an opinion here. But unfortunately, there's not that many people that do this. And I'm gonna go back to kind of this memetic warfare, like non-linearity of memes that circulate on the internet and kind of how those tribes happen. And I think it's just right, like you will have people who post or write about different opinions. So let's say you're usually in this camp, right? You usually like see those kind of opinions. You might be like here, posting that opinion, but then you know there's like certain opinions that just gain way more traction than the others. And then it's a very nonlinear event, and kind of like all the groupings like across here, like they will all kind of, you know, they'll just like go in towards that big one. And I think that happens on all of these, that, you know, like as soon as you're like, let's say whatever, this is an opinion of some liberal left person, but then actually there's another liberal left opinion that is just becoming more popular. Um, and then that just also uh, becomes much stronger. And yeah, I think this is how a lot of these tribes are formed, and kind of what we saw with this graph just showing who supports who in these conflicts. And I just think you see this across a lot of opinions in like especially in the US. And people, yeah, people rarely deviate from these things. It's just very, very interesting to see. And yes, often those opinions kind of meet at the edges with this horseshoe theory, where you have like the same opinions on the left and the right, different different motivations, but same outcome. And yeah, I just think it's very interesting. I think this is kind of why it blew up, because a lot of people saw this and they were like, okay, yeah, I've seen all of those groups of people, and they also like very well fit in with like the political camps they've been in before. So yeah, I think it's super interesting. I think there's a lot of um, things to discuss around this, especially how those camps form and how that happens. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. And yeah, thank you.